You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
It was probably the craziest request I've ever received.
When I first heard about the project, my reaction was, this is absolute nuts. But it was so cool that I wanted to be on it from the start.
We had to invent a group VR experience. I mean, how the hell do you turn an entire bus into a headset?
They wanted to put school kids on a bus and make it feel as if they were driving on Mars.
When you come on to the bus, you can look out the windows. As the experience begins, what you see out the windows now transitions to the surface of Mars. In order to pull this off, we had to figure out how to create this experience of a bus driving through Mars. And the first thing we had to solve was, how do we do this? And we determined that we would do it in game engine, and we used Unreal to do that.
The Unreal Engine is a physically based renderer, meaning that it wants to simulate the real world perfectly. To enable us to simulate the Martian environment, that brought its own set of challenges where we had to go in and tweak stuff and art direct stuff to try and coerce the physically based engine into the look that we wanted for the Mars landscape.
When the bus is driving down the road at 30 miles an hour, you are moving 30 miles an hour on Mars. If you go over a bump, what you see on the screen moves according to what you're feeling inside the bus. When you turn left and when you turn right, you turn left and right on Mars.
How do you take a huge landscape where we can take the bus and drive it anywhere? So the way to execute that was to have a system where we could render Mars in real time. I think the drivable area that we created was 250 square miles.
We mapped every street in Washington, D.C. on the surface of Mars. So wherever we started the experience, you would start off on that exact same road, that exact same intersection on Mars. And to accurately drive the surface of Mars, we used a combination of GPS, 3-axis accelerometer, magnetometer, and a laser surface velocimeter. Absolutely. What that laser does is one simple job. It points a laser down on the ground and it tells you how far you've gone forward or backward. It does one thing very, very well. We had to invent a way for transparent windows to become high-def displays. It's achieved by a box that we created that contains a 4K transparent display, and then the switchable film goes from clear to opaque, and then the display turns into Mars.
We all knew that the screens needed to be transparent. It's a brand new technology. It's not generally available anywhere in the world. We had them made both in China and Korea. They actually literally hand-built these screens.
There's no goggles, there's no headset. They could point out things to the friends that they were seeing, or their friends were showing them something they were seeing. So they were getting a more immersive experience. They were getting more perspective than just a normal VR experience.
In traditional VR, you would just be sitting with the headset on, and there's no 4D interaction. There's no movement, unless you build an entire environment like that. You need the movement, you need air blowing on you, you need something happening to create that experience. Let's not forget audio here. Audio is crucial to this experience. In this experience, we have a bus going through a sandstorm. Without hearing that sandstorm surrounding you, feeling it in the subwoofers, feeling it coming from left and right, it would not be a good experience. You don't just see Mars out the window. You feel it and you hear it. You are surrounded by this virtual reality we've created.
And in all honesty, I think the moment that we knew it was going to work was when we took the bus out. We turned it on and crossed our fingers, and it worked. And it was the moment I realized that we were going to take the kids to Mars. I think what makes it magical is that when the bus starts moving, all of the hardware and software disappears, and it just feels like you're on Mars.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing to see, for me, when we hit the road and everything had come together and all the systems were firing, and you saw the kids who were transported, and just seeing their faces was amazing.
And everyone was pulling for each other, and this was tremendously difficult to pull off.
I mean, I was over the moon or over Mars about how it turned out. The fusion of everything, of the art and the engineering, and just the sheer brain power to put that experience together was amazing.
Morning,
Incredible.
everybody. Hey,
Incredible.
wasn't that great?
I hope we can have a couple people from them come on our program. That is so cool. So
Yeah, actually,
anybody
Chris,
that
I
wants
had-
to go check that out, or anybody that was just listening, you got to just see the video because that's unbelievable. It's called Field Trip to Mars, Framestore company, and who funds this? You know?
Yeah, actually, I've got a whole behind the stories, and yes, I did invite Alexander, who is the guy that you saw in the beginning of this. I guess he's the lead director from Framestore. If you're not familiar with Framestore, they're a 3D special effects company. They've done basically all of the more prominent movies lately, a number of the Avengers movies, several things. They won an Academy Award for the special effects in Gravity. So if you're not familiar with them, they've got a lot behind them. They're obviously putting some time and money into this, but I will answer very quick, or not very, a little bit later on who actually funded this, but I don't want to take away from the story because obviously it's pretty cool to convert a bus into a VR headset, which is kind of what they've done.
Yeah, so crazy.
Yeah. So some of the questions that I had posed to them, and they just didn't have time today, was obviously what kind of hardware did they use? And I don't have it up, but he answered me through one of the YouTube channels that they have specifically. And literally at the time that they created this, they were using 980 or NVIDIA 980 cards, which was kind of like the top of the line. But like, I don't know, I figured it out to be like, let's say they could run 4 monitors per computer. I think they had 16, so maybe 8 computers, but maybe that's limiting the number of computers. But they literally had an entire rack in the back of that bus. I don't know if you saw that there, but yeah, it was obviously extremely significant. But if you see the article behind me, they kind of talk about the whole process. So it does identify who funded this, and at least I say sadly, but was Lockheed Martin. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but Lockheed Martin is also the the largest defense contractor as well. But they do have a space exploration, and obviously they're heavily involved in STEM. You know, I have my own theories. You know, defense contractors normally have a lot of classified material, and you need American citizens to do that, and we don't probably have enough engineers anymore that are local. But that's my own theory. So if we can get more people interested, the fact is getting kids interested in science and engineering is important anyway. To me, this is just like a high-tech thing on wheels. I want to know when this is coming to us. They've actually shown this in other cities. So I've requested that Alexander come on our show at a later date with his calendar to kind of talk about this. So there's more things. As the video showed, yes, they use these custom 4K panels. Now, if you've done any gaming, and Chris, you've got to be a fairly beefy machine, to run even a 25 by 60 by 1440 panel can burden your machine, especially at high quality. Now imagine 4K and maybe having 2 or 3 4K panels on your computer. Then you have to tie all these together so that all the Unreal engines that are running have to be synchronized. So the scene, which is probably split amongst all those monitors on independent computers, are all getting the same information. And so that seems, I mean, obviously is something that intrigues me. But
Well,
also
you know,
the thing that
I
they
mean,
show,
just thinking about it, like because I'm thinking about the same thing. I was just thinking about the same thing. If you had, I mean, when you're standing in a game, if you had people, you know, basically I saw they laid out the bus, and I mean, you can play multiplayer games, right? So Unreal has all that functionality built in there somewhere. So these guys have figured it out. Geniuses. I mean, just when you think that they can't go, like, what are they going to do next? And then they pull out stuff like this, and this could just this simple little evolution, it's not even simple, but the culmination of like kind of these great new technologies with these see-through displays and the combination of accelerometer with the Unreal Engine and all these things that they've come up with could be yet another breakthrough that we, you know, brings gaming to the whole next level. So, oh man, this is just blowing me away.
Well, yeah, what's funny is that I don't know if you're familiar with the term cave, but some time ago, about 10 years ago, about 2004, I created a cave using 3 projectors. And I wanted to use 2 machines. And yes, literally, like you said, I synchronized them like 2 game people, but they were staggered in what you could see. So when you controlled one, it controlled the other. The thing that I thought was neat, if you remember, they made a comment about the laser. And let's see if this.
Yeah, and they said it was for distance forward and backward, not up and down.
Correct. And actually, I looked that up. There's a
velocimeter.
Exactly. It's a laser velocimeter, and essentially, what it does is it takes the correct. It not a velociraptor, but it takes the Doppler shift of the reflected beam coming back into it to determine the velocity of the bus itself. And this is normally used on assembly lines, if that makes any sense. In order, as objects pass through, it can determine the rate of pass through. So to see that it's being used in this was kind of a novel idea. And then obviously it makes sense. You want it very precise. And I was thinking about it, even though they have GPS, they're in the city. And because you have obviously very tall buildings, GPS can't always be reliable. So they're using probably this velocity measuring device, which is very highly accurate, along with GPS in order to maintain accuracy. Another thing that's not identified is that it does have the ability to measure orientation as well. So as the bus turns a corner, it's aware of that. So not only do you have the velocity, but you also have vector velocity. So that way it knows where it's moving. So if you add that along with the GPS information, you can create a very highly accurate. And if you remember what the video said, it tried to map the environment of Mars and the certain sites on Mars based upon a location on this route that they were going through the city. And they must have done this already with several cities. So that's kind of cool. So as you're driving around, you literally have a one-to-one relationship with something on planet Mars. Now, one of the questions I had, and he didn't answer, is where they got their content from, but they did indicate, I think in the video or elsewhere, that a lot of it came from open source materials. So I'm assuming that NASA, but they didn't say that they directly were working with NASA. However, being one of the largest defense contractor and doing a lot in space and satellite communications, I would think that the company behind this, which, if I remember, what was it again? I've already forgotten it.
You're talking
but
about
I thought it was cool.
Framestore.
No, Framestore is the VR, but the people who funded the money was
Lockheed. I thought you said it was.
Yes, Lockheed Martin. So obviously they have their hands in a lot of things. A lot of it is in space technology.
I just can't believe this. I really want to see this thing in real life. I'm surprised they actually didn't do 3D displays and have the glass, have 3D glasses on. But so my thought is like, so this is like going to be the bare minimum of what you need to know to create a VR experience. And like what I would love to know, and what these, obviously for like from an educational standpoint, is like the content creation. I love what they've done, and they're like covering, okay, we used Unreal Engine, here's what we did. But this is like the culmination of probably 10 brilliant, or 20, or who knows, 100 engineers that are just all brilliant people getting together. And if you could lay out the stuff that, like, knowledge that they require, like that they consider to be kind of necessary, right? The bare minimum of what you would need to program something like this, to understand how to tap into these accelerometers, you know, you could build almost like a curriculum all around just this one thing to teach kids, or not even kids, high school students and college students, or even adults, you know, to create content like this, or even tap into kind of technologies, these kind of like front running technologies right now. But man, Unreal is literally unreal. That is really crazy.
Well,
and I love this little GIF here showing this display.
Yeah, well, Chris, obviously, I don't know if you drop out, but I've been covering Unreal and development in that for the last few months. So
Yeah, no, I know Unreal, and I know it has a lot of capability, but they're also kind of tapping into kind of the deeper dive, I would say. They're going a lot deeper than what most programmers that are just programming, whether for games or even VR. I mean, they're adding hardware like accelerometers that are probably, you know, off the shelf type hardware, and having the relaying it back to Unreal. And so if you could kind of have a curriculum that was like showed, okay, here's how you did something like that, and you could build a whole classroom curriculum that would be even like a 2 or 4 year program all about here's how to build something like this, you know, and here's how to put together a computer that drives whatever you said, 16 displays. Here's how to build a computer that does exactly what you're saying, or here's how to chain together computers in Unreal and accomplish the things that they're accomplishing. So
yeah, agreed. There probably isn't a single curriculum, but Unreal does have some very good tutorials as well as a fairly elaborate API. So if anybody who has any background in this, obviously, as you indicated, there was a team of engineers as well as game developers. And the fact is that they're a graphics FX house. They probably have access to a lot of that to begin with. So let's look at some of the hardware we just talked about. Talked about the laser surface velocimeter and how they created a custom built plugin so that it could read it within the Unreal Engine. They also built a custom build GPS system with a 3-axis accelerometer, magnometer, and GPS. And then obviously high-end gaming PCs with the graphics processor, which I found out later it was at that time the 980T. They had, and this was one of my questions as well, how did you power all this? Well, they had a 12 kW, 100 amp, 3-cylinder, 27 HP liquid cooled diesel generator that ran off the same tank as the bus. And then one thing that was mentioned at the end is that they had a 1,000-watt amplifier in order to provide the sensation of audio, but obviously with that kind of wattage, it probably created vibrations to give you the feeling that sand and whatever was actually on the bus. And then finally, it looks like Ben has joined us again, so that worked out well. And then obviously a school bus itself. So very, very cool. As mentioned, we will have Alexander on at a later date, and maybe he can give us an update of the project itself, where they're going to be heading, maybe a calendar event. But yes, I agree with you, Chris. This was just wow, and yeah, I thought we'd spend a little time with it.
And even like what to add on what we were kind of saying about a curriculum is like, yeah, I know Unreal has this great library of curriculum already built in. Like they obviously want to teach people how to use the Unreal Engine to build games, you know, because that's where their money is. And but I think teaching people how to push the boundaries of what's possible, and even if Unreal sponsored a project, even if it was only half as good as this one, but they incorporated kind of off-the-shelf hardware and how to build that in, speakers, bigger computers to build these experiences, I think that would be like another kind of market sector that Unreal probably, I mean, I haven't really seen a lot of, you know, people tap into this market. You know, this is like a whole new market. I mean, you don't see many entertainment experiences.
Actually, Chris, there have been a ton of people, but that's what I cover on a regular basis, and as you know, I develop in it. So there is a lot of people doing this. There's a lot of plugins now to provide external stimuli because VR is so prominent. The other key point that only happened in the last year is Unreal went from from a subscription And previous before that, it wasn't even available. But Unreal 4, not only is it being developed very, very quickly, but it's free. So anybody can go out there and download the engine. You have access to a lot of the materials, so anybody can get involved in this. But yes, I agree with you. And I've tried to do this with our local community colleges, set up a curriculum and a syllabus so that they could learn how to do this, to obviously not to the extent here, but to apply accelerometers and plugins and so forth, and interfacing that, and with all the VR that's becoming prominent now. And last week, and plus at the end of this, I'm going to actually show some comparisons of what Google VR and Gear VR are capable of doing with the Unreal Engine. So we'll get to that in a little bit. So we have a guest with us who's all the way from China, and right now it's 1:15 in the morning. But he is the developer and probably the brains and the ideas behind this, and I'm going to go ahead and jump to it right now. And his name is Jen Lee, and he is from Shanghai, China.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hi. Let me go ahead and introduce you, and then we'll go ahead with the first question. So right now, if you can see my screen, I have your Kickstarter up here. And one of the things that caught my attention with this is, obviously, if you look at this image here, this is your headset. And some people have made a comment, wow, that's kind of an exaggerated headset. But keep in mind, most HMDs, head-mounted displays, look kind of awkward on your head. So I don't know. I remember, has anybody ever seen the movie with, I want to say Dark something or other? It was kind of an indie-type movie. It kind of was the breakout movie for, who's the bald-headed guy? I can't remember.
The bald-headed guy.
Yeah, there's several. I can't remember the name. If it comes to me later on. But essentially, they had a creature in it that had a head that was kind of like that. And I don't know. That's what I thought of. But I'm going to go ahead and play this video.
Not Lawnmower Man.
Not at all. Jeez.
So this is EyeForce VR, and it's on Kickstarter. And Jadge jumped. He lost his connection. He's calling in from China, right? So this is a Chinese.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit. It is a Chinese product, but obviously it's available to anyone. They just opened this up 2 or 3 days ago. They're already at half their goal, 50,000. So essentially, what makes this product unique is the fact is most VR have anywhere between 90 to, let's say, 120 degrees of field of vision or field of view. This particular product has 210 degrees, which literally is about the range, if you can see my hands here, literally out to the edges and beyond, which is about the limits of our ability to see. So if you put your hands out there, we can literally go a little bit behind our ears, but that's the extent of it. Well, that's what this item does, is provide that same view. And here, obviously, is some images showing how much further it goes out. And what this does is it provides a more immersive, because no longer do you have that boxy feeling or that binocular. You just have this fully expansive experience. And there's another company called StarVR that is being backed by Acer, and they just came out with their product that is being promoted by IMAX. But the big difference is you can get one of these products here if you go ahead and move into it now. I think for, what's the price? $399 or $400. The StarVR, I think, starts at $5,000, maybe even $10,000. It's extremely expensive. Now, there are some caveats, and we'll get to that when we talk about it a little bit later, because that was in the news as well. But here it kind of shows you the difference. This is what you normally see off to your left here, and then this is what this thing claims to show. And so one of the things that I was hoping to have was Jen on, and obviously it looks like he's back again, to kind of talk about it. So I had posed some questions to him, because I think the best way to find out about these unique products is to talk to him. So keep in mind he may drop in and out. As you're well aware of or may not be aware of, China does poses some limitations on things like Google Hangouts, and he's had to circumvent that. So he may be dropping in and out because the connection, they literally have to use VPN to use Google Hangouts. You may or may not be aware of that. But he did provide us answers. So I think we can go ahead and go with the first question. And Chris, how about I read the questions and you can pretend to be Jen? Because I think you have the responses there, right?
Is it Jad? I think it's Jad.
Did he say Jad?
I don't know. I haven't got his name yet. He's coming in and out. So yeah, I mean, go ahead. I will answer your questions. Do I need to put on my accent?
Chris will. No, I don't.
That wouldn't be good taste, probably. All right.
Probably not. We don't need to go that direction. All right. So I asked him to tell us about himself. So one of the things that I know just from reading about this, he's from Shanghai, China. So what else did he identify?
That he was dreamed that he could have something to cover his view to go somewhere else when he was driving in a bus. And he says that he looked at all the head-mounted displays out there, and basically there was a Sony that was the most famous one. I remember that Sony one too. And then he experienced the Oculus, and he wanted to make it larger. And so he worked with his coworkers, and in August 2014, they got a first prize at the National Graduate Electronics Design Contest with their own design of a head-mounted display. And then went on to postgraduate and set up a company and went and designed their own thing. And now they have this prototype that you see here, and they want to bring it to the people.
Okay, so one of obviously you've answered 1 and 2, but my next question to him was, obviously there are other HMDs, and we just mentioned the StarVR, and which is just announced that they've sent out their first units to IMAX, which is 10 degrees less, but actually they're the same. They're both 210 degrees. So they seem to have this exact same amount, but again, the StarVR isn't even actually available to the public. They've contracted directly with IMAX. And I saw that the price was anywhere between $5,000 to $10,000. Here on Kickstarter, it's obviously significantly less. But there are some caveats, and one of the questions I had to him is that this thing actually consists of 2 1080p panels. Is that correct?
Yeah, it looks. I'm not sure if it's 210. It looks like 2 5-inch 1920 by 1080. Yeah.
Okay.
And OLED panels.
Okay. So I don't know if he provided a response. That was what I would have gathered.
That's what you were speculating on.
Speculating, correct. And the reason for that is the actual panel resolution is 3860, which would be 2 1080s together. Or sorry, 1920. So it's 3840 in the horizontal resolution, but only 1080 in the vertical. So the way I perceive that is it's 2 5-inch panels side by side, and they're very reasonably priced. I think you can get them for like $30 a piece. So I can see that working. I'm also very familiar from a development standpoint for the things that I'm working on. I Toshiba, what they call an HDMI to MIPI chip. That allows me to actually send out dual channels. In fact, that's what the Oculus uses because it has dual panels, as well as the HTC Vive and a couple of others that we've covered, the Pico Neo, and also the OSVR HDK2 that just came out. They all use this chip. So the hardware is there for this to occur, and the lower cost of using 2 AMOLED panels of that size makes a lot of sense, because essentially if you have that's 5-inch diagonals, so I don't know what that comes out to horizontally. But it makes sense because if you put 2 5-inch panels in front of your eyes, that's about 10 inches in front of your face. And if you add the frame around it, it extends it maybe another inch. So it kind of looks like his design there. So I'm assuming that to be the case. I don't know if he provided an answer to that. I don't have his responses to this. But as you see here, 3840, which is two 1080 panels, are 1920 panels at 1080. And he indicates 13 pixels per angle. And that's very important because the article that we talked about last week, that is important to determine your FOV and how many pixels are perceived per angle. And let me go back up here so you can actually see it. Here's an illustration showing your right eye vision boundary and then your left eye vision boundary. And this is important because I'll actually explain this a little bit later. We only have, for stereo perspective, about 114 degrees. So that's the extent of that. Anything outside of that is monocular because you only see it with one eye. So what is that, 114 each end? If we go, let's say in their case, 210, what is that, about 30 on each side? No. 80, so about 40. So 40 degrees on each side, we don't see in stereo. I'm sorry?
That's not what that's not the additional, that's what we don't see.
No, well, we see it, but we only see it in monocular vision, meaning we only see it with one eye. Because our nose gets in the way.
Got it.
Okay, so, but that allows us to be able to recognize motion and things like that. So, but we don't have any clarity out there. And more importantly, we can't determine depth information at the extent, if you notice where my hands are at. We don't see the depth information.
But we can still see stuff, right? Is what you're saying.
We can, exactly. And some people have created lighting systems that kind of flicker on the boundaries to kind of duplicate that. I've used a glossy panel in order to create that same effect. Here, we've literally created two panels that allow you to do that. So in saying that, I've had some questions like, what is the refresh rate? Does he give an answer on that, Chris? Which would be 6?
I'm not sure. I don't see it in here.
Okay. Well, one of the things, in
I don't
order
really
to
see
drive,
a lot of specs.
Yeah. Okay. So in my own experience, running a 3840 by 1080, and normally this would be double that for UHD or ultra high definition, would be 3840 by 2160, if I remember, twice this, would be your standard UHD. Obviously, this is half of that. HDMI 2 can support 60 frames per second at 4K. And I think, and this is something that supposedly this thing supports. Also, they indicate later on that it requires 2 video ports on your card. You need both the HDMI port as well as a secondary port. One of my questions there, and I don't know if it was answered, can you get away with just one HDMI 2 port? And I don't know if he answered that, and I'll go back later on to identify that. But I'm thinking that they probably can't push this more than 60 hertz because obviously the higher resolution frame. Maybe they can go up to 70, but if he didn't answer it correctly, and since he's not with me, more than likely he can't reach 90 hertz with this resolution, but at least it'll support the same thing that a Gear VR or a mobile experience, which is about 60. The other thing that I don't know if he identifies it in his questions there. And what I'm going to do is going to bounce back to yours, and then I will review them myself here real quick to see. So okay, so he does claim that currently it is at 60, but we'll improve it to 90 hertz by shipping. And it does look joined us again. Is it Jed or Jen? Jen, can you hear me again?
Yes.
Hello? Yeah.
Right.
So
Yes.
Chris is playing you right now if you've been watching us, but essentially my question right now, and I'm glad you joined us, is, you know, from my own experience as a developer, pushing this number of pixels kind of limits your refresh rate, and your question kind of was answered, or my question was answered, that currently it's at 60 hertz, but will be improved to 90 hertz in the production version. Is that correct?
Looks like he is having a hard
Dropped out
time.
again?
Yeah,
Yeah.
or we can't hear
Okay.
him.
Okay, so that's the break sometime. So on to one of my other concerns is, if we can go back to it, because it has an expansive, as you mentioned, 210 degrees, we also have something else we need to concern ourselves, and that is the vertical FOV as well. And since that's still only a 1080, obviously that's not going to be as expansive as the horizontal view. And if you know the resolution of the Oculus and also the HTC Vive, they use 2160 by 1200. So even though it is only 110 degrees horizontally, it is also very much or similar to that vertically. So you have a more expansive, and keep in mind, as you'll see later on when I do a primer on FOV, we have conical view vision. So it's not like we only have a slot. We have a fully expansive both in the horizontal and vertical. And obviously vertical, we're limited to where our feet are at. So that's going to provide some barriers, but still it's fairly expansive. And when we limit that, that could create some issues. So he keeps trying to join us. And can you hear us again?
Yeah, yes, finally.
Okay. All
I
right.
can
So
carry words. Maybe it will broken again, and you can go on.
okay. So the question is, you are supporting 60 hertz right now, refresh, and plan to support 90. Is that correct?
Yes, 30
Okay.
hertz.
Okay.
30. Okay.
So
Pardon?
so the other question I have for you is, even though that you have an expansive horizontal field of view, your vertical is still limited to 1080. Have you found that to be a problem?
Yes, yes.
It is a problem, or?
In our prototype, we don't find it didn't feel any discomfortable or anything, but we will try to improve it. Our vertical view can be as large as 120 degrees or to 150 degrees. So
Okay,
we will
so
try to increase that, but the screen it is a little small in the vertical direction.
right, and that's what I figured
This
as
is
well. But it's still 110, so it's very similar to at least the Oculus and the HTC. You're not actually losing anything at 1080, or
yes,
very minimal. So you've expanded your horizontal, but the vertical is still about the same as what you see in other devices.
yes.
Okay. Okay. So because our connection is so poor, I'll ask into probably the most important question. What kind of content or support will you have with this? One of the reasons the Oculus and even the HTC Vive are doing well is because people have developed for it. And because you have a unique product, how do you plan to get around that?
Okay, now we support OSVR, and we think that OSVR will be another Android since it is open, and the Oculus and Valve is not open enough. So maybe they will more like Apple. Okay, and
Yes.
we think as we are developing more games and apps will support OSVR. Because it is open, it will be supported by many hardware makers.
Okay. Well, I already noticed that
And
OSVR.
also, we will.
So there's also a lag, Chris. I
And
noticed, like 2 seconds. So before he starts talking again. So one of the things I have noticed with OSVR is they are now supporting other headsets besides their own, which is their HDK series. And I've noticed that some of these are Chinese brands, so I know that's occurring. Also, they have a driver for Steam VR, so you could literally buy Steam VR content and play it on your OSVR. It's still in beta right now, and I found it a little sketchy, but at least they're making progress there. And also, they put a lot, I think like $15 million towards developers in order, or maybe even 50, to seed content on the OSVR. So maybe that's part of what Jen is talking about as well. So one other question for you, Jen, if you wanted to elaborate a little bit more on OSVR, but the last item there is I'm looking at the computer requirements. It says you need 2 display interfaces. Can you get away with one HDMI 2 protocol?
No.
Okay, we just lost him again. So let's see, did I have that question in there? Okay. All right, so it will not work with one single HDMI 2 connection. It does require 2. So you need to make sure that your video card supports more than one interface. And most video cards do. However, this will limit its functionality to PCs only. As far as for mobile functionality, I highly doubt that it will be supported. And
unless you have one of those awesome Alienware with the external, you know, with the crazy PCI thing they do for the laptops now.
Yeah, the Thunderbolt. True, and I guess you could strap that to your chest or something. But that's the thing that all of them are facing, at least the Oculus as well as the HTC. So I don't see any difference there. So he kind of answered my questions. I think it's kind of cool. Now let's go up to its pricing, which I did have some concerns with, and I don't know if he provided a response. Now you can get it for $399, and there are 38 left. So there's only 38 left, and that will be available in April of 2017. So as you know, I have been skeptical of a lot of VR stuff because I have already been burnt by another company, who, by the way, has invited us down to LA, or at least back in that interview we did with them, but I haven't heard back from them. And they're supposed to be identifying the announcement of their actual 6 Sense STEM system soon, but Amir follows up with that. But that's another story. So again, delivery date of April, that's about normal. Let's add 3 months to that. So it may look like June or July. My only concern is there are other, Oculus is not standing still. HTC Vive is not standing still. Obviously, they probably have prototypes that they'll be announcing at CES 2017. There are other Chinese companies like Pico Neo and this other one that I've been, something like that. If you look at the spelling, there's another word that seems to come to mind, but I won't bring that up here. But there are obviously a lot of other devices coming out that are unique. The Delato unit actually is like a pair of glasses. They use a very small micro display. In this case, they're using 2 panels to create a highly or a wide FOV. So there's a lot of things out there. Now, the other thing that concerned me is that if you don't take advantage of this 100, the next, as they call early bird, a little confused there. Normally, the early bird specials have been normally the lowest cost, but it jumps directly to 700 or 699. And then if you want one in December, you have a price of $14.99. So my question was, if I'm a developer, is there a developer kit? Did he have an answer for that?
Let's see.
Yeah, he didn't have it. So, did you see anything, Chris?
No.
Okay, well, Jen is back. Jen, if you can hear me, my final question to you is, I've noticed your tier, if you're actually watching us right now, yeah, you can take advantage, at least the first 100 of the $399 special, then it immediately jumps $300 to $699, and then if I want to get one early, I can get one for $14.99, but you don't seem to have a developer's price. Is there a way to contact you as a developer and get a developer's kit? Jen, are you with us?
Yes. Could you hear my words?
I can hear you. So do you have a developer's kit?
Okay. Okay. Now the 399. You can see it is a developer price. It is at a discount. You know that StarVR will be sold at $3,000. It seems. And so to make the large field of view VR high size, it really costs too much, and the lens to manufacture the mold of the lens one time will cost $200,000, and we need at least 3 or 4 times or more to make that kind of mold. So, and the screen also costs a lot much, and in the tracking system, and the outside shell, so it really costs too much, and the price now is really at a discount. But thanks to the people supporting us, maybe we will end $500 to $600 price to the Kickstarter page. Thanks.
Oh, okay. All right. So, like many things, and Chris, you're aware of this, the cost of getting a mold made and injection is fairly costly, and obviously, but that's needed in order to keep the price down. So what I'm seeing here with $14.99 is the cost of literally making a prototype from some type of 3D fabrication, and the panels and so forth all being bought in lower quantities. So I don't see a problem with that. That seems about right. So the big question is it worth the expanded view? And Jen, I will leave this with the last word. You know, obviously, I'm looking out right now and I see an expansive environment, but I've never had an opportunity to try this. In your own words, why do you feel this is important?
You know, 200 our human eyes has 210 degrees field of view in the horizontal direction, and we need to give us if we want to get a good immersion, we must meet that. That is a requirement by our eyes. And if you don't have that, now you can see other HMDs, and you could feel like you see the things through the holes with the hands around your eyes. You can see the bilateral view, so it damages your immersion. And when you play games, and you can see the bilateral view, and maybe some enemies came out from there. You can't see him just because of the field of view, and so you will lose the game. And in the training.
Yep. Well, we just lost him again. But I guess what he was trying to say is that if you don't have that high immersion, you can't see the enemy if you're playing a game. One other thing that I've noticed, that it actually can minimize VR sickness. because you're no longer centric to a very narrow. You now have the expansiveness that we normally envision. So I know that has already been shown. So, it looks like an exciting product. I'll have to think twice and pull out some more pennies. I'm having to pull out way too many pennies from my couch.
Dude, your couch
for all
must
these
be
novel
deep.
ideas. It's trashed. Oh, well. So, Jen, I really appreciate it. Thank you. I think it's a novel idea. And like I said, there has been another company that you're going to cover a little bit later that is working with IMAX, and there's a reason for it. It's very costly. However, I think this is a very interesting product. The fact is that nobody other than StarVR has horizontally 1080p per eye. Now keep that in mind too. The resolution on this has to be probably pretty dramatic too. Currently, you got like 1100 pixels per eye with an Oculus. That's it. And then with a lot of it, like even with the 2560 screen with a Note 4 or a Note 7, it's only 1280 per eye. So imagine 1080 per eye. So that in itself, you're going to get a higher resolution experience. Oh, well. So I think that's about it on this item. Chris, why don't we kind of move right into our first news item? And again, Jen, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. I know that it was difficult to do so, and I know it's late for you. So again, thank you. All right, Chris, first item, please.
Well, Vectary, a product we've had, God, I'm trying to cover their website, but they... I can't get in right now, is this Vectary company, and they're beta.vectary.com. Maybe you can pull it up for me.
Actually,
here we go. This is just an update from the past. So jumping into here.
Correct. So did you?
It's an online tool
as well with them?
Yeah. So we had covered them a little while back, and they have an online 3D tool for designers and makers. It's an interesting tool for sure. It's got a lot of like kind of surface and sketch. I know they had like a, they also have an app, don't they? Like for the, on the iOS and Droid devices. But yeah, it looks like it's kind of evolved quite a bit, and it's actually got some pretty nice features built into it for kind of
if you had
a lot of surfacing.
If you had signed up when we first talked about it.
Yep. I got a notice yesterday about it.
Oh, well, I don't remember what account I used. But essentially, let's see if it's this one. That's pretty good. I wanted to actually log in and show you, but I don't know what I did. Oh. Okay. However, if you had signed up earlier, they're now doing betas. And yes, as Chris said, or alluded to, this is a unique way of designing. It's kind of an organic as well as a modeling application using, I guess, parametric as well. So it's kind of a combination of the two. It is cloud or web-based. So maybe next week I'll play with it a little bit more, but if you can see my screen, which you can't because you're looking at Chris, it is now available in beta. So I don't know if you had to sign up earlier, but you might want to go out to Vectary and see if you can join and get a chance to play around with it. I did the other day, and I didn't have anything to do with it, but I thought it was kind of neat. And Chris, you said you've got a invite as well.
Yeah. So I've I'm part of their beta, so I'm in on their beta right now. I'm just trying to. They want you to go through and answer a bunch of questions. So maybe next week we'll have something to show of it.
Yep. All right. So we'll leave that one for next week. All right. What's the next item?
Well, we have TinkerCAD, obviously beta, has a blog.
Yep, and let me bring that up. So essentially, if you remember, we had, actually, I don't know you were with me when I spoke to Jesse, But TinkerCAD is in beta right now, and they've elaborated their tools and made it more like 123D as far as its features. They have a blog that kind of talks about its cleaner UI. And we went through a few of these because I was actually able to pull up the beta when I was working with or talking with Jesse. You have collaboration capability now, so I can literally hand off a model I'm working on with you, Chris, and we can both work on it together, which I think is kind of a cool feature. And then there'll be more features added, and as mentioned, this is web-based and can be used on a Mac, PC, Linux, and even your iPad. We didn't actually get to try it, but I should have no issues working with it. They are working on providing touch functionality, so you could use it on an iPad. So it's coming along. All right, next item.
Okay, and 3D printed clothes. This is actually really cool. This is something I found on the tubes. And this comes from a YouTube channel subscriber, or a YouTube channel that I've subscribed to called Press Reset. And this guy did a really good job here. And I put him in the show notes, but he walks you through, and you'll see here in a sec. Let me go to his. So here he is, and he actually 3D printed onto cloth and clothing. So he took this Spam logo, and he shows you how to iron your shirt, lay it out on your 3D printer, and obviously it requires a little bit of user finesse, and it may not work with all 3D printers, but this is a he's showing here he's printing directly onto cloth on his 3D printer. So he like lays it out. He puts an Avery label as a backing. So this really interested me. Obviously, I grew up in a screen printing shop, and
yeah, can you expand the video a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And so here he is. He puts the T-shirt onto his bed with the backing, and then obviously zeroes onto the printer, and then gets the nozzle flowing with the purge, and then purge either off to the side or onto a piece of paper, and then he just directly 3D prints. And he says, obviously it works better with a broken up design, so it has a little bit of flex, obviously, because you're going to be wearing this around. But it's just kind of a cool out of the box kind of thinking, and I thought it might be appreciated by some of our listeners to kind of expand what they're doing. I'm going to try this. I think it looks fun. I want to 3D print it.
That's cool. So essentially you put a fabric. Does it identify what type of fabric, or can be anything?
I would imagine that a poly blend would work a lot better than just cotton. I don't know how well it will bond to cotton, but this is a poly. Obviously, it would probably bond really well. So like any poly blend, or even rayon or nylon. So like probably like athletic wear, stuff that would be sublimatable, I would think would work really well printing plastic on. So just an interesting concept. Cool stuff. I really like it. So try it out. Let us know how it works.
Yep. Yeah, actually, if there's somebody out there in the audience who has done this already, we'd like to know more about it. Okay, so I'm going to move on to, since our previous guest was from China, and we had an opportunity to speak with them, and VR is something that's kind of exploded in China, and as mentioned already, there are several companies in China that are creating things. They also have several what do you want to call it, cardboard equivalent clone type products that are now available by the dozen on Amazon. But another area that they've excelled at, and we've covered them several times, is 3D printers. And it is shown, and obviously I'm going to bring up the Hori 3D printer line here shortly, but essentially 3D fabrication in China has really accelerated as well. I've heard that there is a prominent maker industry growing in China, and we've covered how they're using large 3D printers to build homes and so forth. And we've covered quite a few printers, I think, with XYZ. They had a full line that I covered when I was at CES. So obviously there's a lot of people involved with it. There's this new company, Hori. I don't know if they're new, but at least they are to me. They now have a metal 3D fabricating printer. Let's see what else here. As you can see, they have a full series of 3D printers. They're extremely large. In fact, if you remember, we actually covered this large, almost refrigerator size 3D printer with a little cute video. So they've had an extensive number of 3D printers, and from what I have read, and if you remember, James has a FlashForge, which is also a Chinese printer. That he's been very happy with, and a lot of people on Amazon have also been very happy with it. So there is some quality out there if you're looking for a low cost. We did have M3D on last week, building and manufacturing within the United States, but we also have other alternatives that are also fairly decent, and that would be Hori. So just something else to keep in mind. All right, Chris, next item on your part.
Yeah, so this is pretty cool stuff, obviously, being that I live in this industry, but let's go on over. This is from Electronic Specifier Automotive. This is automotive 3D printing market is on the rise as of the 1st of September 2016. A new report published by Allied Market Research, World Automotive 3D Printing Market, forecasts that the world automotive 3D printing market would garner revenue of $2.4 billion by 2022, registering a CAGR of 21.8% between 2016 and 2022. Europe would emerge as the leading market over the forecast period, followed by Asia Pacific and North America. Automotive companies worldwide would adopt 3D printing technology primarily for prototyping and tooling applications. So it goes on and talks about how prototyping and tooling would be the primary application segment. So a cool white paper was released actually last week by Formlabs that kind of entailed making injection mold tooling using a Formlabs machine. So resin, obviously has a little bit higher. It doesn't interface, like it won't stick to material that you injection mold, so it's actually suitable for short run injection mold tooling. So if you're trying to prototype your actual tooling for injection molding or blow molding, you can actually use 3D printed tools, SLA tools to do that, or even PolyJet I've seen used. So there were some key findings in this forecast. Keep in mind, this is a market forecast study, and these are all speculative and very general, and sometimes they're not right, but they're basing it on history. So they're showing they're forecasting based on models that are current. So they're saying that automotive 3D printing market is expected to exhibit a remarkable growth period during the forecast period, attributed to the increasing automotive demand. SLA would continue to maintain its leading position during the forecast period, and the prototyping and tooling application constituted nearly 4/5 of the market share in 2015, and would continue to maintain its leading position until 2022. So you can check more out at electronicspecifier.com, and you can read the article "Automotive 3D Printing Market is on the Rise."
Makes sense. Yeah, I think we covered a little bit that also the air industry is actually building wings now. Actually, that'll be the next item. Actually, I'm going to cover this first, and then we'll get into that next item. But some more technology, and I'm incorporating VR now with 3D technology. Sunic System is promising a 2,250 PPI OLED screen. And if you're not aware of what that means that literally they have a 11,000, and I'm assuming that's horizontal resolution screen that is small enough to provide 2,250 to kind of put this in perspective. A Note 7 has about a 450 ppi, which is a 5.7 inch screen. I think we have about 400, 350 for the iPhone 6 Plus. So this is extremely dense. And what will that provide? Well, obviously the pixels themselves disappear. And they talk about how that will happen. They'll be able to literally, it's called a mask of some sort. They'll be able to minimize the mask and bring these OLED deposits. This is the material that emits the light closer together and bring these panels down to a higher PPI, which effectively, if you put these up to your eyes in a VR experience, you literally won't, you'll just see like a screen, remember how you were talking about Costco's 4K screens, where it looked like you were looking out a window. So you'll have that kind of experience. Now, keep in mind, to drive this number of pixels, you also need a computer that's capable of handling 11,000 pixels, which, right now, 4K is hard to do. And as we talked about with that bus, having 12 of them, they required a lot of computers. So a lot of things have to happen for this to happen in real time. But the fact is, all of this seems to be moving at an astronomical rate. In my lifetime is exciting. I don't know about yours. But on that note, you probably already know about this. I'll move on to Stratasys. So they're using a Stratasys printer to create wings for aircraft. Were you aware of this?
Yeah.
Do you have this? Did you buy this? Is this in the back of your shop?
I wish. I wish. Yeah, but they set a Guinness World Record with this.
They did.
Yeah.
So essentially the world's largest, what was the world's record? Because obviously we've seen other printers print buildings or homes. What makes this different?
Create largest solid object 3D printed in a single piece. So it's the largest one so far in a single piece, they're saying.
Oh,
at least
okay. Well, that would make sense.
So, yeah.
Yep. Very interesting. So what do you think something like that would cost?
Well, I know that they're using some of those, the robotic arms that are still pretty spendy. Probably, $750 to $1 million, somewhere in there. It would be just a random shot in the dark by me.
Well, what I thought was interesting, let's see if I can go back.
By the time you have the engineers do everything and all that, you know what?
Yeah,
you have to pay all these engineers to do their magic, so that's not free.
What? It's not?
No.
Oh well, I've lost the video, but what was kind of cool is it looked like it was a standard like 3D print bed where the arm moves back and forth on rails. Let's see if it comes up again. So, I mean, not that that couldn't be expensive, but no. I need to probably find a Google Fiber somewhere when I'm waiting for to get stuff done. Oh, well. So the whole point was it looked like it was a large bed with rails that the head moved back and forth on. So it just looked like it was scaled much larger than what we've seen in the past. Here we go. I'll pause it here in a second. There. So it looks like a rail system, and that just moves back and forth, and I'm assuming that's the head right there in the middle there. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Oh, well, pretty interesting. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Pretty soon you'll have to buy a new place to put your new printers, Chris. Okay, next item on your list.
Yeah, so I don't know, you want to jump into VR in a round room?
Let's see. Is that what our next item is? What do I've got here? Well, actually I have, so I thought this is kind of cool. MIT has created a 3D printed structure that remembers its shape.
Mm-hmm.
So you literally can create, like in this case, a gripper system, or because it is thermally active, you could have it be one shape, but as it gets close to a particular location, let's say in the body, maybe you have a fever, and that's why you wiggle to the fever, it would change its shape in order to either release medication because the shape has changed, or obviously maybe expand to open something. But obviously there is opportunities from a medical standpoint of having something that changes its shape based upon temperature. So I thought that was kind of cool, and these are actually 3D printed, as you can see there. So anything to add to that?
No, I really think this is amazing stuff. I don't remember if we touched on that last week or not, but
I don't remember that we did. So
yeah. So,
but yes, it was an item that was in the news last week, but I thought it was important enough to talk about again. So yeah, obviously there's this, and then there's these what do they call it? Elastometer type materials that change based upon voltage. That can be printed as well. So I think a combination of the two could be very interesting. So pretty neat. All right, next item. I think we are now in actually scanners. And I wanted to bring up scanners. And this is the SPAR 3D from Intel. Actually, SPAR 3D is the website that it was on, but they covered something called the Intel Euclid, which I will bring up here on, yeah, it's actually the same website. But it's like a candy bar size RealSense device. But what makes it important, and something that I have found, is that the RealSense requires a USB 3 connection to a device, because a lot of the processing and information is sent via USB 3, so there's a high throughput. But if you marry the processor itself to the device, then it can do the computation of all that data and then provide a more succinct information. Let's say if you're wanting to provide, let's see, orientation or positional tracking, you don't necessarily need all that information to be crunched. You could have that information just provide information back to you of its vector positioning. And I'm trying to figure or remember a word, and I can't come up with it right now, that's used in a lot of gaming. But you could have that information provided immediately from this, and that information could be immediately input into a, let's say, a 3D or a gaming engine to provide real-time information on your whereabouts and your orientation and your position. And by having it in this, or in the case that they indicate here, if you add this to robotics, you can control the servo motors to move forward and backwards based upon information that it's obtained from this, without having to have a beefy computer on the actual device itself. So I think that is really, really cool, and I can see a lot of opportunities there. I did have a link, and I don't have it now, that if you go out to Intel's website, not only do they have this device, but they have a developer kit that will be available soon. And they have another model, plus they're coming out with a whole new RealSense, I think it's the R400, that has better definition, and I don't know if that's incorporated in this device or not. I can play the little video here. So I don't know if you're aware of it, but sometime back we covered Intel was supposed to make open source plans to build your own robot, which I never saw, but This was all presented a little bit earlier at the Intel. They covered this, and this also they brought up the Intel Alloy, if you remember, which was their VR headset using the new Windows VR add-on to Windows 10 coming out in 2017. So I thought this was pretty neat, self-contained with its own little computer, so information.
Yeah, and the video is pretty awesome on showing the little robot doing its magic.
Well, even more, I mean, obviously there's always a lot of magic that you can put on stage, but behind the scenes, what it took to do that was very, very simple. Very few lines of code in order to do that. And again, it's because most of the data was already compacted and put into a format that would be very easy to put into, obviously they were using Intel's version of the, of like the Raspberry Pi, but you know, it would be very easy to add that information.
Right. Cool.
Okay, well, let's move on to the next item, which
All right.
I guess is
VR.
VR. So
yeah, so this one
what
is
do you have for
Qualcomm has a new VR headset that could be the reference platform we've been waiting for. This is from roadtovr.com. And so reference platforms are important for developers because it's just like with monitors, whether it's display monitors or stereo speaker monitors. You know, if you go into a music studio where they record music, they have you call them monitors, and they're reference speakers, and they're not designed to necessarily sound good. They're designed to be a reference. So they're designed to be kind of a general reference for what you are listening to. And so obviously the VR space has a bunch of mobile platforms and VR platforms popping up, whether it's the Oculus or the Gear or the OS VR. And so developers are kind of clamoring to have a headset that might be a reference platform that they can use to test out all their VR content on, to get an idea for how it will play on all of the VR devices. And Qualcomm is aiming to apparently tackle that. So they're building this new VR 820, and it's supposed to be a super high-end Snapdragon-driven type device, and it has really, really nice 2880 1440 AMOLED, you know, 70 hertz type stuff. So real high end. And then it also has a German eye tracking system by Sensomatronic Instruments built in. And they're trying to tackle the reference kind of industry, get this to developers. So this will probably be more of like something that you would see the developers have, and also be a high-end VR device for even consumers. So,
well, actually, one of the claims is that it won't be so high-end, even though the quality of the AMOLED.
The price tag won't be so high-end.
Correct. And the other thing about reference, if you remember, the original Oculus that was on Kickstarter was a developer kit.
Right.
And with the DK1 and the DK2, which was extremely important. So this will be the first time that we'll have something similar in the mobile market. I've already signed up for it. I'm pretty excited about it. And as you said, it does use this optical, it's literally, as we've talked about before, it uses a parallax optical system in order to determine positional tracking. And it was tested, and they said that it sort of worked. So obviously some refinements will be there. Or as I see it from what we're doing, adding another active positional tracker along with that could actually improve that. So I'm pretty excited about it. I'm a little concerned that it only has a Snapdragon 820. I do hope that when the reference actually comes out, it'll be a Snapdragon 821, which is about 10-15% better in improvement. But as mentioned, it is a reference. It doesn't have to be the fastest. They also will be releasing the Qualcomm Snapdragon VR API to go along with it. So that will be out soon as well. And some of the things that it will provide is what Oculus provides with the Gear VR, and that's the photon, the latency algorithms in order to support distortion and frame buffering so that you know where you're at in the future so that you can compensate for your head movement. So that'll actually be built into an API that anybody can use. So that's going to be very cool. And yeah, I'm excited about it.
Me too.
So obviously, so I guess we'll both have one. So on to the next item, and I have a little video to show. I don't know. Are you familiar with the Lytro?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
System?
Yeah. Oh yeah. My Frankie, my good friend, sent this to me earlier this week, and
okay.
I thought that the content was actually they were actually going to produce the content, but if they just have a YouTube video showing that they are working on it.
No, there is more to it, and then actually I'll cover it in some detail. So here is a little
But
video.
I don't think you can actually download this experience yet for your Oculus.
Correct.
Yeah, so that we were like all excited. We were like, oh, we get to try out the Lytro data set, but it's just a video of this gal playing on it. So that's them releasing it is showing a video of a gal viewing it. But look, I mean that looks pretty amazing.
Yeah, well, and there's reasons, and let's see, do I have two of the same video? Okay, so here's another that shows that. I thought I had another video. Oh well, that was, oh, here it is, the behind the scenes. So I'll go ahead and play this one. But notice she looks behind her and it's actually a set. And she can move forward and in, and then they don't show the camera because obviously it's taking that. But if you go out to their website, which we'll bring up in a moment, it's a very interesting camera. I don't see it being cheap. I signed up for it as well, but I probably can't afford it. There is this little video here, which I'll bring up. Where are we at? That shows it being brought into, what is the application there? It's not allowing me to expand it. Might be their own tool set. Well, that sucks that I can't expand it. So yes, they obviously will have a series of development tools as well as the actual device itself, which is, let's see if we have a picture of it. It's called Lytro Emerge. So there you go. There's the camera. So I think it's extremely interesting. So let's get a little bit into how does this thing work. So this is an article from Petapixel that is pretty good. It talks about the Lytro technology, and you know, I went back and refreshed myself on it because I thought it was pretty cool. We should be able to actually view this, or maybe not. Great. Oh, there we go. Can you see that? So I'm going to click on the background. Click on the foreground, and you can move around. And the way that this is done is that they created a microarray of little lenses. And each of these lenses have corresponding sensors on the actual sensor. If you know, the sensor is actually a matrix of small elements. So they correspond. So when light hits it, it knows not only the illumination or the value of light itself, but also the direction of the light. And what they do is they record all of these and then they compile it. Obviously there's a lot of computation involved in order to create an image. And because of this, they can determine where the light is, where it came from in order to create a depth map. And then it allows them to be able to focus in the background as you see here, or the foreground, and give you some level of movement, as you can see there, because of the parallax effect. So what they've done is taken this camera system, and let's go back to this system, and created a full 360 array of them. So not only do you capture from a single point of orientation 360 degrees, but because of the way those cameras work, you also have a certain amount of positional tracking as well. So if you notice, she was able to move in and out. So I thought that was extremely cool, and really excited because right now you can get 360 cameras that can capture in stereo, so you get depth information as well as the full panoramic, but you can't move around. In other words, you can't look around an object and get some of that. And that's where these light fields are going to be very important. If you remember, we talked about something similar through Otoy, which uses a camera array to capture thousands of images and then compiles them together to create something. But here, literally, it can be captured, or the data can be captured. But one thing that I thought was kind of funny, let's see if we can go back to this. Not only do you have the capturing device here, which looks like something out of 2001, but yeah, it doesn't show it. But you also require servers in order to take all that information, because obviously it's going to be a ton of it, and then you have to crunch it, and then obviously there are editing tools that are going to be needed in order to manipulate it, and then a player, which is what you were hoping to have so that you could use this in the Oculus, which I guess will be released as well. So I don't think this is going to be something I can afford. I don't have a couch big enough to dig out coinage for this one. But Chris, you have money. You can get this.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think this. I think they want like $1 million for the for that thing, or more.
I would not. Yeah, I would not be surprised. But hey, I think it's going to be pretty cool. Keep in mind that Google has a processor. I can't think of the name of it now, and as well as Otoy. So there's a lot of people going into this new light field technology from different angles. But it's good to see that Lytro is back in the game. Pretty cool. All right, where are we at now?
Okay, one more VR topic, and then we'll move into the Printwhisperer. This is via TechCrunch.com. It's Acer has started shipping its StarVR headset for use at the first IMAX VR Center. StarVR, which is an Acer product, made a small splash at last year's E3 when it demoed a new high-end headset. And just ahead of this year's gaming show, the company announced it would be joining forces to collaborate on the designing and manufacturing of the amusement park ready hardware. So it's got to be pretty heavy duty if it's amusement park ready, but it's coming to the Los Angeles based IMAX VR Center. The initial shipment is in the first phase of a larger planned rollout announced by the company earlier this year. It's an ultra wide viewing StarVR headset, and it's 5120 by 1440 resolution. So it's about twice the field of view. So 210 field of view versus 110 degree, kind of like what we were talking about earlier. And the LA location is the first of several VR centers from IMAX. And they're rolling them out into about a half dozen international location, and then plans to expand into China as well.
Yep. So yeah, I think we've covered this before, and what was interesting about it is one, obviously the very high resolution panels, but if you looked at the optics, they're a custom Fresnel lens that actually is curved in order to accommodate those large panels. But I don't know if I covered or just read about it, but the processing behind it obviously requires a very beefy machine to go along with it. So this is probably why IMAX, but as you mentioned, they're delivered. I don't know which IMAX theater there you can be able to, but what they're hoping is that for $10, you get to experience something other than the IMAX presentation that you watched. And they're not thinking it's going to be more than just a commercial. It'll actually be immersive with positional tracking. So you can literally like move around in a set in the movie you just watched or something like that. That would be kind of cool. Or maybe act out or be a passive viewer in a scene from that movie. That would be kind of neat. I'd do that. I'd pay $10 for that. On top of my $15 ticket for IMAX. I'd do that. But then again, I would probably do a lot of things in this field. Oh well. Spend a lot of money that sometimes I don't have. Okay. On to the Printwhisperer.
Okay, back to school week again. This will be probably our last back to school episode of the Printwhisperer.
I'm sorry, that ended last month, Chris.
Okay, well, we're still back to school, and I missed 1 week, so I wanted to finish up because I had said that maybe I was going to give a tip on finding some money for your school to buy a 3D printer or start a robotics club. Get some money that might be outside the budget of your school. So one of my personal favorite projects is this robotics competition that goes all the way to this national level competition. It's called First Robotics. It was started by Dean Kamen, famous guy who invented the Segway amongst a whole bunch of other stuff. His engineering firm pioneered they were the first ones to bring those gigantic dialysis machines, kidney dialysis machines, and shrink them down and make these at-home dialysis machines. So that's kind of where their bread and butter, I think, came from. And you can actually watch a great documentary about Dean Kamen. It's called Slingshot. And it's a pretty fun documentary. It's on Netflix. I highly recommend any maker / engineer needs to go watch it. It's a great one. And anyways, there's a ton of great resources. He started this First Robotics thing because he wants to he wants to kind of make more engineers out of students and young people, young engineers and entrepreneurs. So he has made this First Robotics project. And you can go to firstinspires.org, and there's a cool link on there. It's called Start a First Robotics Competition Team, and I can pull it up here, and it walks you through how to actually start a robotics competition team. But all these same principles can be applied to getting a 3D printer in your school and starting to use it. Essentially, you just replace First Robotics Competition Team with 3D printing. But it has some really great tips on how to find, how to form your team, register and review resources, and be in the know, and begin building and competing and having fun. It has links, and there's PDFs. There's even email templates and all that right here on, if you go up to programs, or if you go up to FRC at firstinspires.org. If you head up to the link and you go start a team, it'll bring you through all this stuff. And it'll talk about enlisting coaches and mentors and raising funds. So here's a fundraising toolkit they have on here, and it walks you through templates that they have of how to and even hosting a screening of that movie Slingshot we talked about, which will get maybe some sponsors motivated. So there's ways out there that if your budget at your school is kind of filled, or somebody telling you, you can't do this, there's no way, there's no money for this, there's money for it. There's companies all around, engineering companies, companies, and even if with a gift of even $50 or $100 and a decal to put on the side of your robot or your project to sponsor, companies want to help see young people succeed because they're the next generation. I know I want to see young people succeed. So I try to do what I can to promote these things. So, if your school's telling you you can't, there's always, where there's a will, there's a way, and you can always do it. So I just figured I would throw that out there. There's my mentoring guides and all kinds of info at firstinspires.org. You can just Google First Robotics and head up to FRC and start a team. That's where you need to start. And whether it's for 3D printing, or if you wanted to actually start a first robotics team, which I think is also a really great thing, and I would encourage students to do. So that's my Printwhisperer tip of the day for the students.
Thank you, Mr. Printwhisperer. And to add to that, you know that we have our own Robotics Expo here on the Central Coast.
That's right, we do. And they compete at Rio Grande and Atascadero. They both compete in FIRST Robotics. Oop.
Yep.
So,
but the reason I wanted to bring that out, and I don't have the date, it's the latter part of September. So if you're on the Central Coast or wanting a reason to travel through here, we do have our own Robotics Expo done by Josh, who we've actually attended on a couple of times. Brought our 3D printers and some scanning on, 2 occasions, if I remember correctly. We skipped last year, and I will actually be in Idaho at the end during that time frame. So, Chris, if you wanted to take part, just email Josh, and he can set you up for it. But so, yes, we are actually have our own little thing here. So I would be interesting to get Josh on to talk about that. I don't know why I didn't think of that, because obviously he works hand in hand with students in schools, and he probably would have been able to help us in that area as well. So, oh well, bad on my part for not thinking of that. But maybe we can have Josh on maybe next week, and he can promote his show. I'll email him, see about that. Oh well. Well, thank you, Mr. Printwhisperer. So if you have time, I was going to go into a little bit of a primer of what FOV is and why it's important. Obviously, we had 2 products we covered, the StarVR, which has a relationship with both Acer and now IMAX, and then a lower cost version, which I will summarize again at the end of the show, our guest from China with their unit, which was, what was the name of that? EyeForce VR. Which is at a much more reasonable price that looked very interesting. But let's kind of talk about what is FOV. And so I found this article on VR Lens Lab, and I've invited him to come on. This guy creates lenses, prescription lenses for devices like the Oculus and the HTC Vive. As you know, even though there's some focus, it's not really geared specifically for people who wear glasses. It's kind of difficult to wear glasses while you have them on. And, you know, the myopic adjustment that's in these things only works to a certain extent. So this company creates custom lenses, but they also did a few little tutorials or primers on FOV. So I'd like to start out with that, and then I would get into how you actually figure it out on your own device. But so what is the field of view? It kind of talks about it, and I thought this was kind of neat, is that here it shows the nasal and tempora area, but it also reflects that we do not have the same field of view for all colors. Now notice the black and white or monochrome has the most extensive amount, but each of the other colors is less extensive, which I thought was very interesting. So that means if you had an object that was red, you would not see it in the peripheral part of your vision. Whereas maybe, what is the one? Yellow seems to have a more significant impact in the peripheral. So I thought that was kind of neat, something to keep in mind. And another thing to keep in mind that was something new to me is that, as I was talking about earlier in the show, you have what they call a monocular field of view, which is between 200 and 220, which both StarVR and the EyeForce VR accomplish. But the binocular, or the area that we use for depth information, is only capable of 114. And the reason for this is our nose. Our nose seems to be the problem here. What we can see per eye is limited. So even though we can see more out of each eye, it is limited to only each eye, as it shows here in the illustration for each. And you know what, Chris? I've done it again. There. I'm looking at you and you're nodding. And sadly, so is the audience. So again, I will come back to it. Here's a little chart that shows the color information I just spoke about. And this link will be in the show notes, so you can go out and read it. And then here are some illustrations showing the difference. If you're a bunny, notice your level. You've got obviously extensive peripheral, but only a very fine amount of depth information. And I've just read elsewhere that a dog is very similar. It actually has limited depth information, but expansive peripheral. Not as bad as much as a bunny, but we know why that's there, right? Because a bunny gets killed a lot out in the wild. So if they didn't have this ability, they wouldn't be able to detect predators. So it's funny what evolution has provided these different characteristics. Us, on the other hand, have 200 to 220 for monocular field of view, and then only a limit 114 for binocular. So then it talks about how depth perception works, and we've talked about that before using the parallax effect between the different eyes. That here it shows an average of 64 millimeters apart. So if you're wondering why your HMD is anywhere between 60 and 65, this is the reason for it. And then it talks about the field view considerations of the virtual reality headset manufacturer. And one is, and again, something that I have discovered both from a mathematical perspective as well as an intuitive standpoint of creating and iterating designs. A thinner lens provides a bigger VR HMD. And the reason for that is that the thinner lens requires a, we want to call it larger box, deeper box, because the actual focal length is longer. Whereas a thicker lens would allow you to create a shorter focal length. But some concerns, and do they actually talk about it? They don't. The problem with a thicker lens is you also have distortion or curvature, and as well as chromatic aberrations that are more significant. And so even though in the, let's say in the DK2, you had a thicker lens, you had a severe amount of distortion. Now, what Oculus does is they compensate for that distortion with reverse distortion, or they adjust the effect, and it's called pincushion, and I can't think of the other thing, but they just reverse it, and then it basically expands it back out to what it should be. Chromatic is much more difficult to do. On a computer, it can be done. It has the horsepower, but you don't see it in mobile experiences. And that's the shifting of color in the lens itself. That's what you see, the color fringing. And again, in a computer, they're able to compensate for that, but I have not seen that in a mobile experience. So here again, it's showing the thinner lens requiring more distance. You know, let's say if you had identical distance from the screen, you would require more distance from the eye. With a thicker lens, you can bring your eye closer in order to meet that same point on the plane. So this is extremely important because all these play a factor, and I'm going to jump to my, as I'm going to call it, my virtual board. And I'm going to start out with the iPhone 6. The iPhone 6 is a 4.7-inch screen diagonally, but it is actually horizontally only 4.07 inches. So if you notice in my illustration here, and I can actually draw on this, look at that. This distance here, if you notice, forms a triangle. So what we want to do is determine the focal length from our eye, and actually it's offset away from the eye, to the screen, but also capture that entire screen within that triangle or that cone. Remember how we talked about it earlier? So what I've come out with in order to do that, and I'll skip the math here, is that I need a focal length about 34 millimeters. And it so happens, this is one of the more popular lenses that you can now buy. It's a Fresnel lens, and I'll talk about why you would want to use Fresnel lenses in a second, of 34 millimeters. But what that would allow me to do is encompass the entire screen within that distance. Now keep in mind, you have two eyes, so you would be able to, if I drew this out, you would actually have two triangles or two cones, and the combination of those two is what gives you the FOV. So most of the, let's say for the original cardboard, even the second one, have a 45 millimeter focal length. So obviously you're extended even further back. So if you look at a Google Cardboard, you're not getting that true immersive experience you see in the Oculus because it has not been set up to actually capture. And one of the reasons is standard lenses, as I showed you earlier, have to be thicker in order to get closer to the screen because of the magnification process. Actually, it's mainly the focal length. And a thicker lens creates more distortion, which requires more compensation, and this is in a mobile device, so this was a compromise. So it wasn't as immersive as what you see in the Oculus. So as I mentioned, and I don't think this article shows it, but if you use a Fresnel lens design, which literally creates the curvature, but mathematically is able to produce that because of the prismatic effect of all those facets. If you remember, a Fresnel lens has a bunch of circular patterns. If you look in your Oculus, you can see it's faint, but it's still there. But the science, and if you remember, we had the gentleman who created the Wearality on, the science behind it allows you to pretty much create a lens design by using this process in a very flat package. So something like a 35 millimeter, which could be as thick as that, is now less than an eighth of an inch. And because of the Fresnel technology. So that's why you're seeing it, because one, it provides reasonable optics, but in a much lighter and smaller package than what you would have to do in order to create a lens or lens system at this distance from the screen. So this was an iPhone 6. So let me bring up, let's bring up a Note 7, Note 4, which is a Nexus 6P, which is a 5.7 screen, which comes out horizontally about 4.94 inch. You could literally create a distance of 41 millimeters from the screen itself in order to encompass the full range of that screen for full immersion. And again, this is another lens at a similar. And then one that I actually designed for, which is the Nexus 6, which is the largest screen. It's a diagonal of 5.96, which I find to be the most immersive, allowed me to design at, okay, come on, at 43, sorry for my chicken scratch here, but allowed me to design, and actually I don't have it in here. Oh, well. So the lens was about 43 millimeters, which is exactly the focal length of the Neoti VR Uplay. And what is the most optimal screen for it? A Nexus 6. So it's interesting how the math seems to back up what I have figured, or actually not through trial and error, obviously, had designed initially. But it's funny how this all seems to correspond. So I thought that was kind of cool. So I created this little chart here that you're welcome. It's out on my website, and I'll have a link for it, that has this gradiated line. Can you see it there, Chris? It starts at 0 and then goes out to about 750 on each side. If you place this on your device, in fact, you can actually use this on your Oculus, just show it as an image. This will give you an idea how much of the screen you're actually seeing. And what you can do is figure out the number here, but then determine the size of the screen internally to figure out how much each one of these graticals is equal to. And you can figure out what you're, losing as far as your screen. And this is how I determined that the new Nexus, the Gear VR, the brand new one, did I show it last week? Chris, did we tell me? I guess I did talk about it, yeah. But I showed that we're losing like 15% of the screen real estate because of the compromise they use for the smaller screen versus a larger screen. So this is a good tool to kind of figure that out for yourself, and then you can use that to determine your FOV. So that's about it. Little sneak peek at the silver edition of the Neoti VR Uplay. If you're wondering what that bracket is, that's for the structure sensor. But this will be for the new iPhone 7 when it's released. And one of the things that you may have noticed very quickly there, this will have the ability to support a wide-angle lens, which helps the tracking ability, because it uses both a combination of optical as well as the laser tracking system in the structure sensor.
Cool.
So the idea behind my product is to create a very lightweight system. And I've also been working on a headband. And I came up with this new novel idea of creating a kind of a rigid nylon flexible band, you can see it, but then using elastic band on the back. And then there will be points that you can bring it closer on the band itself to provide more tightness or less tightness. Currently I have a little battery, but there'll be a battery clip so that you can have extra juice for your mobile experience. And then it uses the same GoPro locking mechanism that I've used on the previous devices. So if you're wondering what this is, I created this little cardboard cutout that I include for pennies that allow you to have a very isolated experience. Remember how we talked about that? And so that's what I have. And I didn't bring the other device. I found another material that you might be interested in, Chris. It actually is like a Band-Aid, but it's a 3M product that currently is only made in flesh color, so it's not very attractive on a device. But it's very cushiony, but it's thin, but it's also adheres really well. So if you've got a product that you need to put on your face, you can line it with it. It clings to it really well and provides a little extra. And I had forgotten it today, so I'll show it next week. So, you know, like if you want to, if there's an area on your HMD that seems to be rubbing you, you might want to put a little bit of this tape in there, and it will help improve that and may make it less wear on your face. So how much have you used your Oculus, Chris?
Well, I used it a little bit when I first got it. I haven't used it much recently. My computer doesn't really meet the specs. I need to get a higher end processor. So I was, you know, I'm kind of in the market right now to build out a new PC that can handle the thing, and probably move my GPU, my big beefy GPU, over to that, and then I'll probably play with it a little bit more than I do currently. So yeah, but I haven't had much. I haven't gotten to play much on it in the last, I don't know, month or so, but I look forward to getting back into it.
You know, I was thinking, Chris, if you got some time, well, a couple things. One, as you know, I wanted to launch a Kickstarter, and I know that you've been doing a lot of video work. So I was wondering if we could hook up some weekend when you have some time and maybe shoot a couple of scenes. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, we'll have to talk about it for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And also I was thinking we could do like a little VR expo in the future. I know, you know, we live in a small enough community. There's probably not that many people with Oculuses or HTC Vives, and I thought it would be kind of cool to maybe get a little bit of sponsorship and put something together like and create like a VR expo. I don't know. So just a thought. I know you've got a busy schedule, but something to think about.
Okay.
Maybe towards Christmas or something. I don't know. Okay. So to end the show, I'd like to just give another shout out for Jen. I apologize that our connection wasn't too good, but I think it's a novel headset. I look forward to seeing it out there. Maybe even back them to myself. Looks promising. The fact is, I don't know if we made it clear. As far as support, they've got OSVR, and they do have some images. He's actually been working with OSVR, so there'll be support on the open source VR platform for this item. And I do know that SteamVR is supported by OSVR as well, so there could be content sooner than later for it. So Chris, anything else before we end it? Anybody else we want to thank?
That's all. I mean, we went through it. So.
All right, Chris, then I say goodbye. Bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week on All Things 3D.